The scream of wind rattled the windows of Abigail Nelson's modest cabin, as the blizzard of 1878 transformed Red Bluff into an unrecognizable white wilderness. It was the worst storm anyone in Northern California had seen in decades, and it had chosen the worst possible day to arrive, the day her 6-year-old son Timothy had gone missing. Timothy! Abigail shouted into the howling wind, her voice breaking as she stood at the doorway, clutching her woolen shawl tightly around her shoulders. Her brown hair whipped wildly around her face as snow swirled into the cabin. The temperature had dropped so rapidly that afternoon that the normally mild Red Bluff winter had turned treacherous within hours. "Madam, please come back inside," urged Mrs. Holloway, her elderly neighbor who had come to help. "You'll freeze to death out there, and then what good will you be to the boy when they find him?" Abigail turned back, her eyes red and swollen from hours of crying. "It's been 4 hours, Margaret. 4 hours since anyone's seen him. He's only wearing his light jacket." Her voice cracked. "He's just a little boy." The search party had departed 2 hours earlier. A dozen men from town, led by Sheriff Donovan, had mounted their horses and ridden out toward the creek, where Timothy had last been seen playing with the Taylor boys. The Taylor children had made it home safely, but somehow Timothy had gotten separated from them as the storm moved in. "The men know these lands," Mrs. Holloway said, guiding Abigail back to her rocking chair near the fire. "They'll find him." But as daylight faded and the blizzard intensified, Abigail's hope dimmed with the light. She'd lost her husband Frederick to pneumonia just 14 months earlier, and Timothy was all she had left in this world. The thought of losing him too was unbearable. "I should never have let him go play today," she whispered, staring into the flames. "I felt the chill in the air this morning. I should have known." "You couldn't have predicted this storm," Mrs. Holloway said, pressing a cup of hot tea into Abigail's trembling hands. "No one did. It came on faster than anyone's seen in these parts." The clock on the mantel ticked away another hour as Abigail paced, prayed, and occasionally stepped onto the porch to scan the white expanse before Mrs. Holloway pulled her back inside. By 9 o'clock, the older woman had fallen asleep in the chair opposite Abigail, but sleep was impossible for the worried mother. At just past 10, the sound of hoofbeats cut through the howling wind. Abigail flew to the door, throwing it open as a massive figure on horseback emerged from the swirling snow. The rider was bundled in thick furs, his broad shoulders dusted white, and in his arms was a small, still bundle. "Timothy!" Abigail screamed, rushing down the porch steps barefoot into the knee-deep snow. The rider dismounted with surprising grace for such a large man, still cradling the child against his chest. As he approached, Abigail could see her son's pale face peeking out from beneath the rider's heavy coat. "Is he?" She couldn't finish the question, terror strangling the words in her throat. "He's alive, madam," the deep voice rumbled from beneath a snow-crusted scarf. "Cold and exhausted, but alive." Tears of relief streamed down Abigail's face as she reached for her son. The stranger carefully transferred the boy into her arms, and Timothy's eyes fluttered open briefly. "Mama," he whispered, before his eyes closed again. "Get him inside, quickly," the stranger instructed, his voice carrying a hint of authority that brooked no argument. "He needs warmth and dry clothes." Abigail hurried back to the cabin, the stranger following close behind. Mrs. Holloway had awakened and gasped at the sight of the snow-covered trio entering the small home. "Margaret, heat some water and fetch Timothy's nightclothes," Abigail said, her maternal instincts overriding everything else. She laid Timothy on the bearskin rug in front of the fireplace and began removing his frozen boots and socks. The stranger removed his snow-covered hat and scarf, revealing a face weathered by sun and wind. He had dark hair streaked with silver at the temples, and eyes the color of a stormy sky. He was older than Abigail had first thought, perhaps mid-30s, with a strong jaw shadowed by several days' worth of beard. "Samuel Kincaid," he said simply, unfastening his heavy coat. "I found him huddled under a fallen log about 4 miles east near Cooper's Ridge." Cooper's Ridge. Abigail looked up in surprise as she worked to change Timothy into dry clothes. "What on earth was he doing all the way out there?" "Said he was following a fox," Samuel replied, hanging his coat by the door. "Got turned around when the snow started." "Thank you, Mr. Kincaid," Abigail said, her voice thick with emotion. "I don't know how to. No need for thanks," he cut her off, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Anyone would have done the same." Mrs. Holloway bustled in with a steaming mug. "This here's broth. Get it into the boy if you can." Abigail propped Timothy up, coaxing him to take small sips of the warm liquid. Color gradually returned to his cheeks, and Abigail felt herself breathing normally for the first time in hours. "Are you with the search party?" she asked Samuel, who stood awkwardly by the door as if ready to depart. He shook his head. "No, madam. I was headed to my cabin when I came across their tracks, followed them a ways, then found where the boy had wandered off. You have remarkable tracking skills to find him in this weather, Mrs. Holloway observed. A shadow of something crossed his face. "Army scouts teach you to read sign, even in snow." Abigail studied him more carefully. There was a hardness to him that spoke of difficult experiences, but his gentle handling of Timothy told her he wasn't a man to be feared. "Mr. Kincaid, you can't go back out in this storm," Abigail said decisively. "You're welcome to stay here tonight." He looked uncertain. "I don't want to impose." "Impose?" she repeated, incredulous. "You saved my son's life. The least I can offer is shelter until morning." Mrs. Holloway nodded in agreement. "She's right. Only a fool would head back out tonight, and you don't strike me as a foolish man, Mr. Kincaid." After a moment's hesitation, Samuel nodded. "Much obliged." "I'll be getting home to my Walter," Mrs. Holloway said, gathering her shawl. "He'll be worried sick with me out in this weather." "You can't possibly go out now," Abigail protested. "It's just next door, dear," the older woman assured her. "I'll be fine. You take care of your boy." She patted Abigail's cheek, nodded to Samuel, and slipped out into the night. An awkward silence fell over the cabin as Abigail continued to tend to Timothy, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep. Samuel moved to the window, peering out at the unrelenting storm. "There's stew on the stove," Abigail said softly. "You must be hungry after your journey." "Thank you, Mrs." He paused, realizing he didn't know her name. "Nelson. Abigail Nelson. But please call me Abigail." Samuel ladled some stew into a bowl and sat at the small wooden table. "This is mighty good, Abigail. It's the least I can do." She carefully laid Timothy on the small sofa, tucking blankets around him. "I don't know what I would have done if," her voice caught. "But you didn't," Samuel said firmly. "He's home safe now," Abigail nodded, wiping away a tear. "Have you been in Red Bluff long, Mr. Kincaid?" "I don't believe I've seen you in town." "Sam," he corrected. "And no, I'm just passing through. Bought a small piece of land up near Cooper's Ridge last month. Been fixing up the old cabin there." "All alone," he nodded, focusing on his stew. "What brings you to these parts?" she asked, settling into a chair across from him. Sam was quiet for a moment, as if weighing his response. "Needed a change. Spent too many years moving around." Abigail sensed there was more to his story but didn't press. "Well, we're grateful you were passing through today." After finishing his meal, Sam insisted on taking the floor near the fireplace, refusing Abigail's offer of her bed. "I've slept on worse," was all he said. As Abigail lay in her bed later that night, Timothy tucked safely beside her, she found herself wondering about the mysterious man who had appeared like a guardian angel in the storm. There was something about Samuel Kincaid that intrigued her, a depth of character behind his reticence. Whatever had brought him to Red Bluff, she was eternally grateful that fate had placed him in her son's path tonight. The blizzard continued through the night, but for the first time since Frederick's death, Abigail felt truly safe as she drifted off to sleep. Morning brought weak sunlight filtering through the frost-covered windows. Abigail woke to find Timothy's fever had broken, though he was still exhausted from his ordeal. To her surprise, the cabin was warm and filled with the aroma of fresh coffee. Sam stood at the stove, his back to her. "You're still here," she said, pulling her shawl around her nightdress as she entered the main room. He turned, a hint of awkwardness in his posture. "Thought I'd stoke the fire and make coffee before heading out. The storm's let up." "I'm glad you stayed," she said sincerely. "Thank you for the coffee." Sam nodded, pouring her a cup. Their fingers brushed as he handed it to her, and Abigail felt an unexpected warmth that had nothing to do with the hot liquid. "How's the boy?" Sam asked, glancing toward the bedroom. "Better. His fever broke overnight." She sipped her coffee. "This is good. You've clearly made coffee over many campfires." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "One of the few useful skills I picked up in the army." "You served in the war?" she asked. "And after," he said shortly. 12 years total." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sheriff Donovan and 2 other men from the search party stood on the porch, their faces lined with exhaustion and worry. "Mrs. Nelson," the sheriff began, hat in hand. "We searched all night but couldn't," he stopped, noticing Sam. "Kincaid." "What are you doing here?" "He found Timothy," Abigail explained quickly. "Last night near Cooper's Ridge." Relief washed over the men's faces. "Thank the Lord," Sheriff Donovan said. "We feared the worst when the temperature kept dropping. The boy's all right, he will be," Abigail assured them. "Thanks to Mr. Kincaid." The sheriff gave Sam an appraising look. "That's quite something, finding a boy in a blizzard like that," Sam shrugged. "Just happened to cross his trail." "Well, the town will be mighty grateful to you," the sheriff said. "We were all worried sick about young Timothy." After the men left, promising to spread the good news through town, Sam reached for his coat. "I should be heading back. Got animals to tend to." Abigail felt a strange reluctance to see him go. "Perhaps you could come for supper sometime, when Timothy's feeling better. I'm sure he'd like to thank you properly." Sam paused, his hand on the doorknob. "That's kind of you, but I don't get to town much." "Then I'll bring supper to you," she said impulsively. "Once the roads are clear." He studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "If you want," he finally said. "Cabin's nothing fancy, though." "I don't need fancy, Mr. Kincaid. Just a chance to properly thank the man who saved my son's life." After Sam left, Abigail went to check on Timothy, who was awake and asking for breakfast. As she prepared oatmeal, she found herself thinking about Sam's weathered face and the gentleness with which he'd carried her son through the storm. It had been so long since she'd given any thought to a man besides Frederick. The year following his death had been consumed with grief and the struggle to maintain their small farm and raise Timothy alone. But something about Sam Kincaid had awakened a feeling she'd thought was buried with her husband, a flutter of interest, of possibility. "Mama, who was that man?" Timothy asked as she set his breakfast before him. "That was Mr. Kincaid. He found you in the snow and brought you home." Timothy's eyes widened. "I remember. He wrapped me in his big coat and put me on his horse. He told me stories to keep me awake." "Stories?" This surprised Abigail. "What kind of stories?" "About buffaloes and Indians and stars that show you the way home," Timothy said between spoonfuls of oatmeal. He knows everything, Mama. He said he'd teach me to track animals someday. Abigail smiled, touched by this revelation of Sam's kindness. Well, we'll have to have him over to supper to thank him properly. Can we, Mama? Can we go see his cabin? He said he has horses. We'll see, sweetheart. First, you need to rest and get your strength back. As the days passed and Timothy recovered, word of his rescue spread through Red Bluff. Sam Kincaid became something of a local hero, though he was rarely seen in town. Abigail learned bits about him from townsfolk who crossed his path. He'd purchased supplies at the general store, arranged for lumber at the mill, and hired 2 men to help with construction on his property. Keeps to himself, that one, Mrs. Holloway reported over tea one afternoon. Walter says he's building quite a nice place up there, though, not just fixing the old cabin, adding on to it proper. Did Walter mention if he seemed settled? Abigail asked, trying to sound casual. Or is he just passing through? Mrs. Holloway gave her a knowing look. Seems to me a man doesn't build like that unless he's planning to stay a while. She patted Abigail's hand. And it's about time you showed interest in something besides that vegetable garden of yours. Abigail blushed. I'm just being neighborly, Margaret. He saved Timothy's life. MMHMM, the older woman hummed, unconvinced. Well, being neighborly is a fine place to start. A week after the blizzard, with the roads finally clear enough for travel, Abigail packed a basket with fresh bread, apple pie, and a pot of beef stew. She hitched their wagon, helped Timothy up onto the seat, and set off toward Cooper's Ridge. The journey took nearly an hour, winding through snow-covered pines until they reached a clearing overlooking a small valley. There stood a cabin, smoke curling from its chimney, with a half-finished addition extending from one side. A barn and corral had been erected nearby, where several horses grazed on hay spread over the snow. As they approached, Sam emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. He stopped when he spotted the wagon, his expression a mix of surprise and something else Abigail couldn't quite name. Mr. Kincaid, Timothy called excitedly, waving. Sam approached as they pulled up, helping Abigail down from the wagon. Didn't expect visitors today, he said. I promised supper, Abigail reminded him, lifting her basket, and Timothy has been begging to see your horses. Sam's gaze moved between them, then softened slightly. Well, I can't deny a boy his horses. Come on in. It's not much, but it's warm. The cabin was indeed warm, heated by a substantial stone fireplace. The interior was simple but tidy, with a table and chairs, a bed in one corner, and shelves holding books more than Abigail would have expected. A rifle hung over the door, and a saddle rested on a stand near the hearth. It's lovely, Abigail said sincerely, setting her basket on the table. Sam looked skeptical. It's functional, still working on making it proper livable. He nodded toward the unfinished wall. Adding another room and a proper kitchen come spring. Can I see the horses now? Timothy asked eagerly. Timothy, mind your manners, Abigail scolded gently. But Sam was already nodding. Sure, son. Got a gentle mare you might like to meet. As Sam led Timothy to the barn, Abigail unpacked her basket, setting out the food and taking the liberty of looking around more closely. A framed daguerreotype on the shelf caught her eye, a military unit, with a younger Sam standing tall in the back row. Beside it lay a worn Bible and several books on farming and animal husbandry. This wasn't the cabin of a man just passing through, she realized. Sam Kincaid was building something here, a home, perhaps even a future. When they returned, Timothy was chattering excitedly about the horses, especially a mare named Daisy who had let him feed her an apple. Mr. Kincaid says I can come ride her sometime when it's warmer, Timothy announced. If that's all right with your mother, Sam added quickly. meeting Abigail's gaze. "That's very kind of you," she replied, feeling a flutter in her chest at his consideration. "Now let's eat before everything gets cold." Over supper, Sam gradually relaxed, answering Timothy's endless questions about horses, tracking, and life in the army. Abigail noticed how he carefully steered the boy away from questions about battles, instead focusing on the skills he'd learned: how to read the stars, find water, and track game. "Where did you learn to cook like this?" Sam asked Abigail, helping himself to a second serving of stew. "My mother taught me," she replied. "She always said a good meal could solve most of life's troubles." "Wise woman," Sam commented. "She was," Abigail agreed, a hint of sadness in her voice. "We lost her and my father to the fever 5 years ago." "I'm sorry," Sam said, and she could tell he meant it. "Is that why you and Papa moved here from Sacramento?" Timothy asked. "Because Grandma and Grandpa died." "Partly," Abigail acknowledged. "Your father thought Red Bluff would be a good place for us to start fresh." "And then Papa died too," Timothy said matter-of-factly, in the direct way children often addressed painful truths. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken by Sam clearing his throat. "This pie is something special." Grateful for the change of subject, Abigail smiled. "Apple's Timothy's favorite." "Mine too," Sam admitted, earning a delighted grin from the boy. As dusk approached, Abigail reluctantly began packing up. "We should head back before dark." Sam nodded. "I'll ride alongside you." "Roads can be tricky this time of day." "That's not necessary," Abigail protested, though part of her welcomed the offer. "Maybe not, but I'd feel better," Sam said firmly, already reaching for his coat. The ride back was peaceful, with Timothy eventually falling asleep against Abigail's side. Sam rode alongside them on a tall roan gelding, occasionally pointing out features of the landscape or signs of wildlife. In the golden light of sunset, with the snow-covered fields stretching around them, Abigail felt a contentment she hadn't experienced in a long time. "Thank you for supper," Sam said as they approached the outskirts of town. "Best meal I've had in years." "You're welcome anytime," Abigail replied. "Our table's always open to friends." Sam glanced at her, something warming in his usually guarded eyes. "I'll remember that." As they parted ways at her cabin, Abigail found herself hoping it wouldn't be long before she saw Samuel Kincaid again. In the weeks that followed, Sam became a regular visitor to the Nelson home. It started with him bringing a small wooden horse he'd carved for Timothy, then offering to repair the loose boards on Abigail's porch. Before long, he was joining them for Sunday dinners after church, though Abigail noticed he always sat in the back row and slipped out before the final prayer. The people of Red Bluff gradually grew accustomed to seeing the tall, quiet man around town, usually in Abigail and Timothy's company. There were whispers, of course a widow and a newcomer with a mysterious past, but Abigail paid them little mind. For the first time since Frederick's death, she felt alive again, aware of the quickening of her heart whenever Sam's wagon appeared on the horizon. As winter gave way to spring, Sam's visits became more frequent. He taught Timothy to ride on Daisy, whom he'd brought down from his property specifically for the boy's lessons. Abigail would watch from the porch, her sewing forgotten in her lap, as Sam patiently guided Timothy around the paddock, his large hands steady on the boy's back. "He's good with him," Mrs. Holloway observed one afternoon as they watched the riding lesson. "He is," Abigail agreed softly. "And easy on the eyes, too," the older woman added with a sly smile. Abigail felt her cheeks warm. "Margaret! Oh, don't Margaret me. I've seen how you look at him when you think no one's watching, and how he looks at you when he thinks the same." "He doesn't look at me any special way," Abigail protested, though her heart skipped at the thought. "If you say so," Mrs. Holloway replied, unconvinced. All I know is Frederick would want you to be happy, dear. It's been over 2 years now. 1 year and 7 months, Abigail corrected automatically, then sighed. I know, it's just complicated. Love always is, the older woman said wisely. Doesn't mean it's not worth pursuing. Later that evening, after Timothy had gone to bed exhausted from his riding lesson, Abigail and Sam sat on the porch, watching fireflies emerge in the spring twilight. A comfortable silence had settled between them, the kind that comes only with genuine ease in another's company. Timothy's a natural horseman, Sam commented. Takes instruction well. He admires you, Abigail said. You're very patient with him. Sam looked down at his hands. He's a good boy. You've done well with him, especially on your own. It hasn't been easy, she admitted. There are days I'm not sure I'm doing right by him without a father's influence. Seems to me a boy couldn't ask for a better mother, Sam said quietly, but I understand missing a father's guidance. Something in his tone made Abigail look at him more closely. Did you lose your father young? Sam nodded, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. I was 8, mining accident in Colorado, left my ma with 4 boys to raise. That must have been difficult. She did her best, he said simply. Taught us what she could. The rest we had to figure out for ourselves. Is your mother still living? Abigail asked gently. No, lost her winter of '69. My brothers are scattered now, 2 in Montana, 1 in Oregon. Yet you chose California. Sam was quiet for a moment. After the army, I needed somewhere different, somewhere I could start fresh. Is that what you're doing up at Cooper's Ridge? Starting fresh? He turned to look at her then, his eyes reflecting the last light of day. Trying to. Abigail felt a strange tension in the air between them, as if they were standing on the edge of something significant. She waited, heart quickening, but Sam simply rose to his feet. It's getting late. I should head back. Of course, she said, hiding her disappointment. Thank you again for Timothy's lesson. Sam paused at the steps, looking back at her. Would you and Timothy like to come up to the ridge on Saturday? The addition's finished, and the wildflowers are starting to bloom in the meadow. We'd like that very much, Abigail replied, unable to keep the smile from her voice. As Sam rode away into the gathering darkness, Abigail found herself wondering what it might be like to start fresh alongside Samuel Kincaid. Saturday dawned clear and warm, a perfect spring day for their visit to Cooper's Ridge. Timothy could hardly contain his excitement as they loaded the wagon with a picnic basket and a fresh apple pie. You think Mr. Kincaid will let me help with the horses today? He asked for the 3rd time. I'm sure he will, Abigail assured him, adjusting her bonnet. She'd taken extra care with her appearance today, wearing her blue dress that Frederick had always said brought out the color of her eyes. She told herself it was simply because it was her best day dress, suitable for visiting, but Mrs. Holloway's knowing smile as they passed her house suggested otherwise. The transformation of Sam's property in the weeks since their last visit was remarkable. The cabin addition was complete, with a covered porch wrapping around 2 sides. A vegetative garden had been planted alongside the house, and the corral had been expanded. As they approached, they could see Sam splitting wood near the barn, his shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms bronzed by the sun. He spotted them and set down his axe, wiping his brow as he walked to meet them. Right on time, he called, a rare smile lighting his features. Timothy scrambled down from the wagon before it had fully stopped. Mr. Kincaid, can I see Daisy? She's in the corral waiting for you, Sam told him. Go on, but don't open the gate until I'm there. As Timothy raced toward the horses, Sam helped Abigail down from the wagon, his hands strong and warm at her waist. She was acutely aware of his closeness, the clean scent of soap and pine that clung to him. "I hope we're not interrupting your work," she said, nodding toward the pile of split wood. "Not at all. Been looking forward to your visit." There was a sincerity in his voice that made her pulse quicken. "Come, let me show you around properly." The cabin interior was a revelation. What had once been a single room was now a comfortable home, with the addition providing a separate bedroom and an expanded kitchen area. Shelves lined one wall, filled with books, and a rocking chair sat near the fireplace. Fresh wildflowers stood in a clay vase on the table, a touch that surprised and moved Abigail. "Sam, it's wonderful," she said, taking it all in. "You've created a real home here." He shrugged, but she could tell her approval pleased him. "Still needs a woman's touch, but it's coming along." The words hung between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Abigail busied herself unpacking the picnic basket to hide the blush creeping up her cheeks. The day passed in a pleasant blur. They picnicked in the meadow among wildflowers, watched Timothy ride Daisy in the corral, and explored the stream that ran along the edge of Sam's property. By late afternoon, Timothy had fallen asleep under a tree, exhausted from his adventures. "He'll sleep well tonight," Abigail remarked, spreading her shawl over him. "Boys need room to run," Sam said, watching the child with a fondness that touched Abigail deeply. "This is good country for a boy to grow up in." "It is," she agreed, following his gaze across the valley. "Frederick and I always dreamed of a place like this, something bigger than our little plot in town." "Why did you stay in town after he passed?" Sam asked. Abigail sighed. "It was easier, I suppose, close to help if I needed it with Timothy being so young. The farm takes all my energy just to maintain as it is." "It's a lot for one person," Sam acknowledged. They stood side by side, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western hills. The moment felt fragile somehow, pregnant with possibility. "Abigail," Sam began, his voice low and uncertain. "I'm not much good with words, but I want you to know that meeting you and Timothy, it's changed things for me." She turned to face him, heart hammering in her chest. "Changed things." Sam ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she'd come to recognize as a sign of his nervousness. "Before I found Timothy in that storm, I was just existing, building this place, but not really thinking beyond the next day." His eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen. "Now I find myself thinking about the future, about possibilities." Abigail took a step closer to him. "What kind of possibilities, Sam?" He reached out tentatively, taking her hand in his. "The kind where I don't come home to an empty cabin, where there's laughter and family around my table." He swallowed hard. "Where there's you." The directness of his words took her breath away. "Sam, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know you're still grieving Frederick, and I respect that. I'm not asking for anything now, just a chance maybe, when you're ready." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes, not from sadness but from the unexpected joy of hearing her own unspoken hopes given voice. "Frederick will always be a part of me," she said softly. "He gave me Timothy, and years I'll always treasure. But my heart didn't die with him, Sam. These past months being with you, I've felt alive again." Hope dawned in Sam's eyes. "Does that mean it means I'd like to explore these possibilities with you?" Abigail finished for him, squeezing his hand. "One day at a time." The smile that broke across Sam's face transformed him, erasing years of solitude and hardship. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned down and pressed his lips to hers in a gentle, questioning kiss. Abigail responded, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest, feeling the strong, steady beat of his heart beneath her palm. When they parted, Sam rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that since that morning in your kitchen with the coffee." Abigail laughed softly. "That long, longer if I'm being honest," he admitted. but it seemed wrong having just met you." A small voice interrupted their moment. "Mama, Mr. Kincaid, what are you doing?" They turned to find Timothy watching them with curious eyes, his hair rumpled from sleep. Abigail felt herself blush, but Sam simply knelt down to the boy's level. "Timothy, I was just telling your mother how much I care for both of you," he said honestly. "Would it be all right with you if I came around even more often?" Timothy considered this seriously. "Would you teach me more about horses and tracking?" "Absolutely," Sam promised. "And would you make my mama smile like she is right now? She didn't smile like that before you came." Sam glanced up at Abigail, his eyes soft. "I'll certainly try my best." "Then it's all right with me," Timothy decided. "Can we have pie now?" Abigail laughed, her heart full. "Yes, sweetheart, we can have pie now." As they walked back to the cabin hand in hand, Timothy running ahead, Abigail marveled at how life could change in an instant with a blizzard, a lost child, and a stranger's kindness. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she knew with certainty that the future held more promise than she dared hope for just months ago. Summer bloomed across the valley, painting Cooper's Ridge in vibrant greens and golds. Sam's courtship of Abigail progressed with the deliberate pace of a man who knew the value of building something to last. 3 evenings a week, he would ride into town after finishing his work, sometimes bringing fresh vegetables from his garden or wild berries he'd gathered from the hillside. They would sit on Abigail's porch after Timothy was asleep, talking about their days, their dreams, and gradually, their deeper fears and hopes. Sam shared stories of his time in the army, of the horrors he'd witnessed during the Indian campaigns that still haunted his dreams. Abigail spoke of her fear of failing Timothy, of the crushing loneliness that had followed Frederick's death, and of her struggle to maintain their small farm. "I've been thinking," Sam said one evening in late June, as fireflies danced in the twilight. "Your vegetable patch needs a better irrigation system. The soil's too dry with this heat." Abigail sighed. "I know. I've been carrying buckets from the well, but it's barely keeping things alive. I could set up a proper system for you. Wouldn't take more than a day or two." "You've already fixed my roof and rebuilt the chicken coop," Abigail protested. "I can't keep accepting your help without giving something in return." Sam took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "Seeing you and Timothy happy is return enough." "Sam," she said softly. "What are we doing?" He looked at her questioningly. "What do you mean, this arrangement? You riding into town several times a week, helping with my farm, then riding back to yours. Wouldn't it make more sense if—" She trailed off, suddenly uncertain. "If—" Sam prompted, his eyes intent on her face. Abigail took a deep breath. "People are talking, you know, about us." "Let them talk," Sam said dismissively. "Unless it bothers you." "No, it's not that. It's just inefficient, you spending all this time traveling back and forth." A slow smile spread across Sam's face. "Abigail Nelson, are you proposing some kind of arrangement to me?" She blushed furiously. "I'm not proposing anything. I'm simply pointing out a practical consideration." Sam chuckled, then grew serious. "I've been thinking about practical considerations, too." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. "Been carrying this around for 2 weeks, waiting for the right moment." In his palm lay a simple gold ring with a small pearl set in the center. Abigail's breath caught in her throat. "It was my mother's," Sam explained. "Abigail, I know we've only known each other a few months, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love Timothy. I want to build a life with you both." Tears filled Abigail's eyes. "Sam." "You don't have to answer now," he said quickly. "Take all the time you need. I know it's a big decision, especially for Timothy." "Yes," she whispered. Sam blinked. "Yes, it's a big decision. Yes, I'll marry you," Abigail clarified, laughing through her tears. I love you, Samuel Kincaid." The joy that transformed his features made him look years younger. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. "When?" he asked against her lips. "How soon can you be ready?" "Let's not rush," she said, though her heart wanted nothing more than to begin their life together immediately. "There's Timothy to consider and harvest coming up." "Fall," Sam suggested. "After harvest. That gives us time to prepare and for Timothy to get used to the idea." "Fall sounds perfect," Abigail agreed. The next morning they told Timothy over breakfast. Abigail had worried about his reaction. He had been so young when Frederick died that he barely remembered him as a father, but still, this was a significant change. "Timothy," she began carefully. "Mr. Kincaid has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes. Do you know what that means?" Timothy looked between them, fork poised over his pancakes. "It means Mr. Kincaid will live with us and be my new papa," Sam cleared his throat. "That's right, son, if that's all right with you." Timothy considered this seriously. "Will we live here or at your place with the horses? We thought we'd live at Cooper's Ridge," Abigail explained. "There's more room there, and it's a wonderful place for a boy to grow up." "And Daisy would be right there all the time," Sam added. "Plus, I've been thinking about getting a dog. Every boy should have a dog, don't you think?" Timothy's eyes widened with excitement. "A dog of my own, your own," Sam confirmed, glancing at Abigail for approval. She nodded, heart full at his thoughtfulness. "Then yes," Timothy exclaimed. "When are we moving?" Abigail laughed. "Not until after harvest, sweetheart, and after Mr. Kincaid and I are properly married." "Can I call you Papa now?" Timothy asked, looking at Sam with hopeful eyes. Sam's expression softened with emotion. "I'd be honored, son." As Timothy returned to his breakfast, chattering excitedly about dogs and horses, Abigail caught Sam's eye across the table. The love and gratitude she saw there mirrored her own feelings exactly. From the tragedy of a blizzard had come the greatest blessing of their lives. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Red Bluff. Most reactions were positive. Sam had proven himself a hard-working, honorable man during his time in the community, and many were pleased to see Abigail finding happiness again. There were a few raised eyebrows at the relatively short courtship, but as Mrs. Holloway pointed out to the sewing circle, when you know, and those two know. The summer passed in a flurry of activity. Abigail began packing up the house in town, deciding what to take to Cooper's Ridge and what to sell. Sam continued expanding his property, adding a proper bedroom for Timothy and enlarging the kitchen to Abigail's specifications. Every weekend, the three of them would work together at the ridge, planting, building, planning their future. By August, it was clear that maintaining two properties until the wedding was impractical. After much discussion, Abigail and Timothy moved to Cooper's Ridge ahead of the ceremony, with Mrs. Holloway acting as chaperone until the wedding to quiet any wagging tongues. Sam temporarily moved into the bunkhouse he'd built for future farm hands, an arrangement that amused Abigail even as she counted the days until they could truly begin their life together. The harvest was bountiful that year. Sam's careful planning and hard work, combined with Abigail's knowledge of planting, yielded more than enough to see them through the winter with surplus to sell in town. Timothy thrived in his new environment, spending his days helping with chores, riding Daisy, and playing with Rex, the shepherd puppy Sam had brought home one evening. As September arrived, wedding preparations began in earnest. The ceremony would be small, held at the Ridge with just close friends from town in attendance. Abigail sewed her own dress, a practical blue silk that could be worn for other occasions, though finer than her usual attire. The night before the wedding, as Abigail sat on the porch with Mrs. Holloway after Timothy had gone to bed. She felt a profound sense of peace. "Nervous, dear?" Mrs. Holloway asked, noticing her contemplative mood. "Not nervous exactly," Abigail replied. "Just reflective. A year ago, I couldn't imagine ever feeling this way again." "Life has a way of surprising us," the older woman said wisely. "Frederick would be happy for you, you know. He always said his greatest wish was for you and Timothy to be taken care of if anything happened to him." "Sam's a good man," Abigail said softly. "Different from Frederick in many ways, but good in all the ways that matter." Mrs. Holloway nodded, patting Abigail's hand. "That he is. And he looks at you like you hung the moon, which doesn't hurt either." Abigail laughed. "No, it certainly doesn't." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect early autumn day. Sam had spent the night in town at the hotel, honoring tradition despite his grumbling about the senselessness of being separated when they'd been living on the same property for weeks. As Abigail dressed with Mrs. Holloway's help, she heard the wagons arriving, bringing the small group of friends who would witness their vows. Through the window, she could see Sam greeting guests, handsome in his new suit, his usually unruly hair neatly combed. Timothy ran circles around the adults, resplendent in his Sunday best, proudly showing off Rex's new tricks. "Ready?" Mrs. Holloway asked, adjusting Abigail's simple veil. "More than ready," Abigail replied with certainty. The ceremony itself was brief but heartfelt. They exchanged vows under an arch Sam had built, and Abigail had decorated with autumn flowers and greenery. Timothy stood proudly at Sam's side, holding the rings until the appropriate moment. When the minister pronounced them man and wife, Sam's kiss was both tender and promising, drawing good-natured cheers from their friends. The celebration continued into the evening, with food and dancing on the cleared ground near the cabin. As dusk fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Abigail found herself watching her new husband as he showed Timothy how to properly toast a marshmallow over the fire, the boys' laughter mingling with Sam's deeper chuckle. "Mrs. Kincaid," a voice beside her said, and she turned to find Sheriff Donovan raising his glass in salute. "Congratulations. You've got yourself a fine man there." "Thank you, Sheriff," she replied warmly. "I certainly think so." "Never thought I'd see Kincaid settle down when he first rode into town," the sheriff mused. "Had that look about him the one men get when they've seen too much and are running from something." Abigail followed his gaze to where Sam now stood, deep in conversation with the blacksmith, one arm casually draped around Timothy's shoulders. "He wasn't running, Sheriff. He was looking for something. He just didn't know it yet." "Well, looks like he found it," Donovan said, tipping his hat. "Best wishes to you both." As the last guests departed and Mrs. Holloway discreetly rode back to town with the Taylors, Abigail put an exhausted Timothy to bed in his new room. The boy was asleep before she finished tucking the blankets around him, Rex curled at the foot of his bed. She found Sam on the porch, gazing up at the stars. He turned as she approached, opening his arms to her. She went into them willingly, resting her head against his chest. "Happy, Mrs. Kincaid," he murmured against her hair. "Completely," she assured him, lifting her face for his kiss. "And you?" "More than I ever thought possible." His arms tightened around her. "There were times during the war and after when I didn't think I'd live to see 30, let alone find this kind of happiness." "We found each other when we needed it most," Abigail said softly. "That night in the blizzard." "It wasn't just Timothy you saved." Sam's eyes darkened with emotion. "You saved me too, Abigail. You and Timothy both." He kissed her then, not with the restraint he'd shown in front of their guests, but with a passion that spoke of months of waiting. Abigail responded in kind, her arms twining around his neck as she pressed herself against him. "Maybe we should continue this inside," Sam suggested, his voice rough with desire, "where I can properly begin my duties as your husband." Abigail laughed softly, taking his hand and leading him toward their bedroom. "I believe that's the best suggestion you've made all day, Mr. Kincaid." Later, as they lay tangled in their sheets, Abigail's head resting on Sam's chest, he traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "I've been thinking about expanding the farm," he said quietly. "Oh," Abigail prompted, enjoying the rumble of his voice beneath her ear. "We've got good land here. Could raise more than just crops. Thought about breeding horses, maybe some cattle." "That sounds wonderful," she murmured sleepily. "And maybe," he hesitated, his hand stilling on her skin, "maybe expanding our family too, if you wanted." Abigail propped herself up to look at him, touched by the vulnerability in his expression. "I'd like that very much. Timothy would love a brother or sister." The smile that lit Sam's face was answer enough, but he pulled her close for a deep, tender kiss that soon rekindled the passion they'd shared earlier. As they moved together in the darkness, Abigail felt the last pieces of her heart healing, not forgetting the past, but embracing a future she'd never dared imagine. Winter came again to Cooper's Ridge, but this year brought no devastating blizzard. Instead, the snow fell gently, transforming the landscape into a serene white paradise. Inside the cabin, now truly a home, the Kincaid family gathered around the fireplace each evening, Sam whittling or reading, Abigail sewing or knitting, and Timothy playing with Rex or working on his letters. By spring, when the wildflowers once again carpeted the meadow where they'd shared their first kiss, Abigail had news to share. As they sat on the porch swing Sam had built for her birthday, Timothy already asleep inside, she took her husband's hand and placed it on her still flat stomach. "Come September," she said softly, "there will be another Kincaid to welcome." The joy that dawned on Sam's face was all the response she needed. As he gathered her in his arms, murmuring words of love against her hair, Abigail silently thanked the blizzard that had once terrified her for bringing this man into their lives and changing their future forever. 5 years later, Cooper's Ridge Ranch had grown into one of the most prosperous in the region. The original cabin was now the heart of a larger house, surrounded by barns, corrals, and well-tended fields. Sam's dream of breeding horses had become reality, with Kincaid stock in demand throughout Northern California. On a warm summer evening, Abigail stood on the porch, watching her family in the yard below. Timothy, now 11 and tall for his age, was teaching his 4-year-old brother James to throw a lasso while their 2-year-old sister Emma tottered after them on chubby legs, determined not to be left out. Sam followed behind Emma, his hands ready to catch her if she stumbled, his face alight with fatherly pride. As if sensing her gaze, Sam looked up, his eyes finding hers across the distance. Even after all these years, that look still made her heart skip. He scooped up Emma and headed toward the porch, the boys trailing behind. "Mama," Emma squealed, reaching for Abigail as they approached. "Papa says pie," Abigail laughed, taking her daughter. "Yes, sweetheart, apple pie for dessert tonight." "Still her favorite," Sam said with a grin, leaning in to kiss Abigail's cheek. "Like mother, like daughter. And father," Abigail reminded him. "Don't pretend you don't ask for second helpings every time." "Guilty," he admitted cheerfully. "Boys, wash up for dinner." As the children raced inside, Sam's arm slipped around Abigail's waist. "Happy?" he asked, a question he still posed occasionally, as if making sure he was fulfilling his promises. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "And you, more than I deserve," he said honestly. Sometimes I still can't believe that blizzard led me to you." "It wasn't just the blizzard," Abigail said softly. "It was you, Sam. You could have passed by those tracks, decided it was too dangerous to follow, but you didn't. You were brave enough to face the storm." "Best decision I ever made," Sam murmured, drawing her closer. As twilight settled over Cooper's Ridge and their children's laughter echoed through the house, Abigail silently blessed the twist of fate that had brought Samuel Kincaid to her doorstep that snowy night. From fear and tears had grown a love and life more beautiful than she could have imagined, proof that even in the darkest storms, hope could find its way home.